Hey, I'm Lauren, certified building biologist, wellness interior designer, and healthy home educator. I want to welcome you to the House Holistics podcast, where we explore how healthy buildings create healthy people. I'll be bringing you life-enhancing conversations with some of the brightest minds in the world. Perhaps your full potential is on the other side of a healthier environment. I'm your host, Lauren Rade. Let's go deeper. I am very excited to talk about your book, Brian. Did you notice the sweater I'm wearing?
Yeah, I was gonna say you must be hot. I'm sweating like
No.
crazy.
Did you notice?
Oh, the color patterns and right? Yes, perfect.
It's almost
Perfect.
August 1 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I'm wearing this sweater to represent your cover for you. I'm doing this for you.
Perfect. That's dedication. I appreciate that. And I love the contrasting kind of yin yang sort of vibe you got
Well, I
going on
figured
there.
that was why you chose this cover,
It
which I'm
is.
very excited to get into this book. And it really
Yeah.
wasn't that long ago, Brian, that we were shuttle buddies.
Shuttle buddies,
We were
yes.
heading to a regenerative farm in Texas for, it was my first confluence. Was it? It was your first confluence
Same.
too. Yeah. To
Yeah, and I actually got the early. I wasn't supposed to be on that
really,
shuttle. I was supposed to be on two shuttles later. I don't know if you like actually remember or even knew what was happening at the time, but I landed. I was supposed to be on the 2 o'clock shuttle. I landed at like
huh.
9:50 and was like, man, I got like 4 hours to kill in the airport, and then just saw like a telegram message come in from somebody else about a shuttle, and I was like, what shuttle are you on? Or whatever. She's like, I'm on the 10. I'm like, oh, I guess I missed it. She's like, no, we're still here. I'm like, what? Hold on, don't leave. And I ran through the airport and I got on a shuttle 4 hours earlier, which was not only like just awesome and more convenient, but I ended up making some really good connections on that
Mhm.
shuttle ride that stuck with me throughout the trip. And I just felt like when that happened, there was a
It
reason
was
for sure.
synchronistic as well because you and I had organically connected on the Telegram thread. We had never met. So when we were in the shuttle heading to Sovereignty Ranch, we both didn't know that we were our shuttle back to the airport on the
Yes,
last
that's right.
day. So I know you and I
Yes.
were probably both thinking like we really need to find that Brian guy.
Exactly, exactly. Well, like I didn't even cross my mind that there was like, the chance that the like first person I met was this person, that random one of the 1,000 people, whatever that was going to be there, that was supposed to be sharing a ride
At
with me back. So
3:30 in the morning to catch a
exactly,
shuttle. Is
exactly.
anyone available? So I very much feel like
Yes,
we were supposed to meet Brian, and I enjoyed so
I
much
agree.
of my time with you, getting to know you. And at Confluence was when I actually learned that you wrote a book, and it's called The Primordial Code. So when I got back, I ordered it and I read it in like a week. And as you know, our community is into books about consciousness and spirituality and self-help and growth. So it's not often that I get to read a book of this nature. And so I just really connected with it, and it was a page turner. And so kind of the main topics for those listening that Brian covers in his book, there's an emphasis on holistic health and childhood education, connection to source or creator or God, regenerative agriculture. I mean, the list goes on, earth and buildings, which is my specialty. And then this value exchange economy that you just kind of explain so well. So if you can, Brian, would you offer a glimpse into what this story is about, the Primordial Code? Tell us more.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I mean, like you mentioned, it's the content within the story covers a wide array of topics, most of which can be whittled down to like health, spirituality, and freedom concepts, right? Of some sort. But there's a lot of subcategories there. But the story is essentially about a fictitious society called Okablaya, which is the Lakota word for freedom, and it operates in isolation and secret, right? So the story explains obviously how that goes. You know, it's a fiction story. You have to go with it a little bit, but the idea is that they exist in secrecy, and they've been operating this way for hundreds of years in peace and prosperity. And it's not a just utopia as in like there's no conflict and there's no problems, you know, like some kind of fantasy world. The idea is like, yeah, they have their things, but they handle them much differently than we do here. But anyway, they're thriving. They're peace, prosperity, genuine happiness, people living with purpose and fulfillment, and operating really by the universal laws of nature and the indigenous principles of trust and honor and integrity. And they see what's happening over here in the West, and they're like, okay, you know, what do we do here? We can't just sit back and watch. Well, some people think that they should, and there's a little bit of a conflict there, but they decide that ultimately we need to get involved, and they start this underground project where they bring over just basically typical Americans and sort of bring them through this, you know, training, so to speak, or introduce them to their ways, teach them their traditions. They meet mentors and teachers and guides and friends along the way that all kind of hold this wisdom which they call the Primordial Code. So that's really obviously the name of the book. It's where they bring everything back to this code that they believe lives within all of us. It's in our hearts, it's in our minds, it's in the ethereal realms around us, and it exists for all people or all beings in all places at all times. And the idea is that they begin to learn how to start unlocking this code and transforming themselves. And you know, there's through that self transformation comes these realizations and calls to potentially do more and play a bigger role in the healing of our society. And then, of course, they have some decisions to make at the end about their involvement and things like that. But you know, that's part of the story. You'll have to wait on
I
that.
was really expecting a book the size of The Alchemist to show up on my doorstep. I know you're getting this a ton.
Oh my God, so much. I have a lot of people who have bought it and told me like, dude, I don't know if I'm gonna read this thing. It's just too long. And I tried telling them, I'm like, listen, it reads quick. There's a ton of dialogue. It's written in like a modern, from like a spacing standpoint and font size standpoint. It's very like modern, like you're reading like an email newsletter kind of thing. And if it's meant to flow, and so far the feedback checks out from people like yourself saying, I flew through this. It's a very common thing. It's like I couldn't put it down. So you know, I try to get people to just crack it open and start. You know, read the first chapter. Don't commit to the whole thing. Just see where it takes you. But yeah, that's a very a common
I
surprise for me.
appreciate actually the format, how you wrote it, because you said it reads like an email, and now that I think about it, it totally does. And you're able to kind of like take it and not feel so overwhelmed by it. I wasn't overwhelmed by this book at all, by the way. More so, it just gave me a hand cramp, you know?
I actually just started. I decided the other day that I was like, I want to start like reading it again, just to like refresh my memory, starting getting the sequels coming in the mind. And I'm like, oh my God, this thing is heavy. I kill.
Maybe you're just really strong, Brian, but like a lot of us are like, okay, maybe you can like figure out how to make it a little lighter for the second book.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
it's
working
I
on some
think people
ideas.
that know you and care about you are just kind of roasting you a little bit, but it's
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
fantastic. And this being your first book, I really appreciate you being vulnerable and authentic and honest right at the get-go of like, hey, look, if you are a grammar nerd, you know, you might want to kind of jump over the fence and be okay with it because I sense this message needs to get out into the world ASAP. And I was struck by that because I said, wow, that gives me courage to maybe write a book one day. Two, this is an urgent message in so many ways. And so I'm curious, can you talk about that sense of why this message needs to get out to the world?
Yeah, definitely. And why the message, but also just why, like, that I made that decision to know that this is not 100% grammatically and punctuation and all those things correct. And I'm putting it out anyway because I didn't believe that it was at a point where there's nothing here that's going to affect the story or people's ability to follow anything or anything like that. And I knew another round of editing is a long process and was just kind of putting off, getting this thing out. And the final stages, as a lot of people know, are really tough. You're like, while you're writing, this is great, I get in the flow. And then it's like, right now it's time to ship this thing. And it's like, every fear in the world comes creeping in and tries to convince you that, you're not ready. This is 2025 or 24 at the time. And this is all changing, right? We're about being real in the moment, what's happening right now, what feels important. People consume so much content, right? It's just more about like, does this story grab? The message isn't clear. Are the concepts important for this relevant moment? If all those things check out, then it just needs to ship. It needs to be out. And yes, if some people are like, oh, I can't handle that some of these words are spelt wrong or whatever. And
No, it's not at all. There were very few things, and I wasn't even paying attention to that because I think almost the energy behind you doing that, Brian, is the primordial code energy.
yes,
It is looking at empirical code and saying, we're done with that.
yeah. This is a new earth, new paradigm. It's funny, I was just listening to a podcast today with someone named Ben Stewart. He's this storytelling expert and filmmaker. And he was literally saying this exact thing about like the days of like getting it perfect are gone. It's more about getting it out. And saying like he was sharing, one of his filmmaking students was like, I'm doing this documentary not because I'm an expert on the subject or know everything. I'm actually doing it because I don't know everything, and I'm putting it out in a sense of like I don't really know what's right here, but I'm like doing this thing anyway. And he's like, yes, that's where we're headed. That's where everything is shifting. Things are changing too fast. Stakes are too high. I mean, the story is about the high stakes of our society and our civilization, and I believe that, and this is my best attempt to play some kind of role in that. And sitting around having it edited another 2 or 3 times and putting it back 6 months doesn't serve that mission.
No, I think it's a brilliant indirect move that is very directly just hearkening this code that you are painting a picture for all of us to open our hearts to. And could you explain to the listener maybe some low-hanging fruit of the difference between empirical code and the primordial code? Because that's the meat of this message.
Yeah. Sure. So the idea is that this primordial code is this timeless, infant, universal wisdom that lives within all of us, that we all feel that, like, really, if you trace back just about every religion down to its deepest core principles, we realize that they're all pretty much saying mostly the same things about, first of all, trust, honor, integrity, forgiveness, compassion, love, really, right? And like these higher frequency vibrational, these higher frequency vibrations are what really lead us towards the truth and lead us towards the answers, and we can tap into them really at any time. And that's in us from the moment we're born or before we're born, right? Is kind of the idea, and it flows through us at all times, and that all the answers that we need along the way on this journey can always really be found by tuning in to ourselves and tapping into this intuitive wisdom that lives within us all. And the idea is that empirical code is the sort of conditioned programming in our, in the societal collective. Some of it's intentional, some of it's not. It's just like these things that, quote, everybody knows are true or everybody thinks and believes, these kind of unwritten agreements we've all found ourselves just following along with without ever really pausing to stop and think about. And that most of those are directly conflictual with the primordial code that lives inside of us. So like just, things that feel true in our heart, but just isn't how society works around us. So we just kind of ignore the feelings inside and just do what everybody else is doing and kind of go along with the way it's always been done, or what everybody knows is true, or what everybody, like that is like kind of the easy, normal herd mentality. So there's, yeah, that, and then the idea is that coding is what allows empires to thrive, or what allows us to remain um, controllable and suggestible, and allows us to all not forces wouldn't be the word, but like guides us all towards choices that mean sacrificing who we really are inside and what we really believe is true, so we can play the matrix game.
One of the main characters, the female main character, and you do this so well, you toggled back and forth between the male main character and the female main character chapter to chapter. Sandra, what's her name? And she had quite a conflict with empirical code versus primordial code when it came to science. And that conflict really conveyed in writing, because she was really confronted with, this is not how it's done. This is not what I learned. This was not my training. This didn't come from a guy in a white lab coat. Oh no. So, how was writing that character and also the male character? I mean, did a lot of that primordial versus empirical code, I'm assuming the answer, Brian, but did a lot of that just flow from within the well in you because of all the years of waking up, of unlearning, of relearning? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and you're right on the nose there. I'll start by saying though quickly that originally, when I was in the very early stages of putting together a plot line, I only had one character. It was just a male, a male in his 30s, and it's like, oh, that's easy, that's most relatable. It'll be easy for me to do that. A guy that goes from kind of asleep to awake, has an awakening. It's easy. And then I realized there was a lot of things I wanted to cover, particularly this whole kind of overarching science and spirituality um, plot. That's like, can they exist together? Are they opposite? Are they the same? Or do they exist together? Do they not? That was a really important part of the story for me. And I started realizing that this one character, of all the things I wanted to have happen and all the topics I wanted to cover, it just didn't really make sense for this. Like, I'm going to be really forcing a lot of conversations and interactions here with one person to have all of this happen in a short period of time. So I was like, oh, I guess I should really have a second character. I watched a show. I don't watch much TV, but I watched a show called Nine Perfect Strangers. I don't know if
I
you've
don't
heard of
watch
it.
TV either.
Um, yeah, I hardly ever do. And it was pretty good, but I heard the book was great. Someone told me, and they were like, "Yeah, there's like a whole bunch of main characters." I was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "There's like multiple characters. It's like every chapter changes." I was like, "Huh, that's interesting." And then so I'm like, "Oh, maybe I'll do a second character." And then they all kind of like started taking shape, and I wanted to have. I was like, "Well, I guess I should do a female to make it, kind of show both sides. I can really show the differences in their transformation, because ultimately they're both kind of finding their way to a more divine masculine and divine feminine versions of themselves. But yeah, so to get to your point, I decided to make this female character. I decided that she was going to be like a heavy into the science side of things, and that was going to be immediately teamed up with a super spiritual mentor. So you like this is, I don't know if you like caught this or not, but like this is pretty. It kind of breaks some rules regarding writing. I'm not formally trained or anything, but I know that the main characters are supposed to normally be people that you like kind of fall in love with pretty quickly. And what happens is that Sandra actually holds a lot of beliefs that most people reading this story, at least so far, kind of disagree with, right? She's like super sciencey, super logical minded, no spiritual belief whatsoever. If it can't be proven in a peer-reviewed study, she doesn't want to think about it, or whatever. And a lot of our crowd, immediately off the bat is like, "Oh, do I like this character or not?"
She seems so close-minded.
And
Poor girl.
yeah, exactly. She's like closed-minded. She's, whatever. She represents some things that like some of us don't love. But yeah, that was important for me because of my, yeah, it reflects my own journey in a lot of ways. And as a big time fitness guy for many years, I really was in the exercise science realm of things. And um, I was just like everybody else, was like, you learn something by learning from somebody else who has a higher accreditation or credentials than you do. That's how you learn. And then you learn that, and then you teach it to someone who has lower credentials than you do, kind of thing. You know, you're just sort of passing along this information, and you're just sort of trusting that the person with higher credentials, you know, really gets it, and that they learned it from somebody, that they learned it from somebody. You know, it's all kind of getting passed down from, as we know in the science world, pretty untrustworthy resources sometimes. And it's also just like, more importantly, it just takes us out of the remembrance that we actually have the answers inside of us already ourselves that we need. And when I shifted away from that, I shifted mainly through an extended fast is where it started about 8 years ago, actually. Yeah, 8 years ago, I did this extended fast and started realizing, whoa, like a whole bunch of things changed in my body, in my mind. I started realizing like, I don't need more outside of me, external. Like everything I need is inside and within. I started having all these realizations, all these epiphanies and awakenings. It just kind of triggered a whole bunch of events and changes that I made. I went like super holistic, super intuitive, like swung the pendulum so far the other way. And yeah, I wanted to kind of represent that a little bit. I wanted to show that dichotomy, if that's the word, right off the bat, and create that tension. There's some tension right in the beginning, right? So like, and you know, give her a chance to have this awakening on her own, and kind of let the reader follow along.
So the male character, would you say that he represented your spiritual awakening 8 years ago?
Not really, because I was always still kind of like an open-minded, ahead of the curve kind of guy. Even like, so I started in CrossFit, which I'm sure you know by now, but like I was like way early in CrossFit before any gyms were around. I was basically like one of the first couple of CrossFit gyms on Long Island. And in that realm, I was always kind of ahead of the curve. I was always just like kind of a little bit ahead of things. Like I was doing ice bath. Like a couple of my friends joke around. Like when I first started doing ice baths and sauna, it was like people
Yeah.
are like, "What is that? Like, what are you doing?" It's a long time ago, and you know, it just kind of gives you an idea of where my mind's always been at. But no, I tried to have him be a little bit more of like the
Mm-hmm.
average, average guy. You know, somewhat mostly
Mm-hmm.
skeptical, not like totally closed off, but like instinct, like gut knee jerk reactions to things or of anything kind of woo woo or spiritual is pretty much like, yeah, no, that's not me. Um, and yeah, I tried to keep it a little bit more generic in general.
One thing that stood out to me with what you just said is being ahead of the curve. I'm the same way in almost every area of my life. And I think there's a reason for that, Brian. When people are ahead of the curve, whether it's health, fitness, spirituality, they are natural visionaries. They're natural leaders as well. And so anytime I see somebody else that I already know is a visionary and they're doing something that is ahead of the curve, I am paying attention, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to get on this podcast with you to specifically talk about this book, because you have been ahead of the curve. If you look at your resume, okay, Brian is feeling and sensing that this message needs to get out into the world. He's a visionary, he's a leader. Let's pay attention. Um, so it makes sense why you painted the male character in a maybe more relaxed way that maybe an average person would enter into a spiritual awakening, because some of the subjects, especially around education, movement patterns, even the earth and buildings, the characters struggled with, and you really portrayed them struggling in a way that was relatable. I remember the part about them interacting with the earthen buildings. I think it was Sandra, but she was like, I couldn't really tell where the house started and the garden ended. And I'm like,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, yes. And so I'm curious, have you spent a lot of time in natural earthen buildings, or did that come intuitively?
Um, so not a lot of time. I but I did when I was writing most or the first like two chapters specifically, which took me almost as much time as the
Really?
next
Wow.
12 chapters. Um, I was living in Costa Rica, and there was everything was like very open concept. There was I didn't live in any natural build homes. Well, one was like close. Um, we had bounced around a few times to different rentals. One of them got like sold right as we were about to get there and stuff. So it was like we had like a little bit of a journey. So we went a few different places, but there were several other natural builds. I just was just kind of getting involved in this like regenerative permaculture sort of scene down there and like learning about different types of builds because people were this was a community that was expanding, so people were like planning their own builds and were talking about we were highly considering living there. Um, so so I was seeing a lot of things that just looked cool, felt cool, getting a feel for that. And I was also already familiar just sort of with the concepts of not only natural builds, but like a lot of curved walls, like no straight lines, like kind of keeping, and how most of our homes are just like everything's hard squared, right angles in our homes, in our schools, in our roads, like everywhere, and how much that just kind of affects our way of thinking and kind of takes away could interfere with sort of flow states and whatnot. I had a general awareness of these things, and it felt like that it was very appropriate for the people of Okleblaya to be living in this type of way, and it also was just an easy way to immediately introduce different concepts in the story. Simple ways. Yeah, all the walls are curved. There's like open concept. They use floor. They don't use chairs. They're a floor culture. So right off the bat, it just gives the reader like what, like it kind of pulls you in, right? So it checked a lot of boxes for me to cover those things, but I do think it's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
important.
hugely important. I mean, energy quite literally does get stuck in our 90-degree angles in our home.
I know that because you told me when you told me about the clapping. I was like, okay, this makes
Yeah, I
perfect
mean,
sense.
curves,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen because the energy is able to move around the space freely. So I mean, I was so happy to hear that. And I think it's important, especially as we move into this time of maybe alternative concepts for people. Earthen homes is
Yes.
out there for an average North American, especially. It is just kind of this idea that wait, people live in mud huts? Like, no, thank you. But when you actually look at the science even behind the thermal properties, the thermal bridging, the insulation, the noise, the acoustics, I mean, it's high performance construction.
Yes.
And so, of course, the people of Okleblaya would have
Okleblaya.
this
Yes.
form of technology because in a
Yes.
in a way, earthen structures are this form of technology that most of our culture is unfamiliar with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what Sandra's reaction, right? She says it felt very unsterile was her, because like again, it was just painting that picture of like she comes from this white lab coat sort of environment where like you kind of have to fill in some gaps, but you probably imagine she's like using like constantly using like hand sanitizer and all these things, like whatever, and then all of a sudden she's in this not judging hand sanitizer, but you know what I'm saying, like she's going from this one extreme to the other and like feels like this feels dirty or unsterile, but really it's like this is our
Yeah,
environment. This is natural.
we are nature.
Yes, exactly. I'm glad you appreciated that. It's an I think uh underlooked concept in the story, I guess, or it gets overshadowed.
And the emphasis on floor culture. I mean, I am sitting on my floor now. Like, I don't even use my furniture anymore. It's just collecting dust at this point.
And I'm not actually, which is strange because normally I am. I just between where my I get good Wi-Fi, and where the Wi-Fi reaches in a place that keeps me confident, I have to sit at this table. So, but normally, yeah, I'm on the floor.
I love that because I would love more of floor culture to be a normalized thing. I mean, especially in the education system. I'm thinking about kids and the posture sitting at a
Yeah.
desk. You had a heavy emphasis on education, and I found the interactions between the mentor, the mentors and her children and the other children, the conversations back and forth between them were really intriguing to me. And even the communication style is forward communication. And I've often been told by people that I can sometimes be blunt, but I
Hmm.
resonated with the people of Okoblaya because that's how they talk.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's we're so um it's so surprising when someone is really frank and honest and forward that we almost like we're immediately like taken back, like this is rude, you know? But really the idea is that like it's just radical kind of transparency and openness. And it's not that I think less of you because I disagree with you, or or I don't love you or care about you or like you because I have a difference in opinions. It's like, of course we're gonna have
Hmm.
differences in opinions. Of course we're going to um, have to, we're going to disagree on things and have to work through conflict. Like that's just a normal thing that's going to
Hmm.
happen like all the time. And it doesn't take us out of a place of unconditional
Hmm.
love and care for each other. So yeah, those conversations are of course carefully crafted. I have a lot of time. I had a lot of time to sit and really make sure they
Yeah.
felt right to me. Um, to say that my own conversation and daily communication with my kids is quite on that level would be not true, of course, but it's what we aim for. It's what we aim for, that openness. And just like it's rare to find a case where honesty is not the right thing, like, or radical transparency and honesty is a mistake or not the right way of handling it. Even if, yeah, sometimes people are just like, whoa, what you like, you're really gonna just say that to me? I was like, no, it's true. Like I still like you, but that's the truth, yeah, thank you for noticing that. The idea was to, the characters, the children aren't like a major part of the story, but it also helps the idea, in my mind, I'm expecting the reader to be like, well, the reader be like, oh, I wonder what they do about this, and I wonder what they do about that, and like it allows me to have just these couple interactions and scenes that sort of give a glimpse that can hopefully kind of paint a bigger picture. Hearing the kids or seeing, watching the kids play on the field and like the way the school works and stuff. It's one scene, it's a powerful scene, but it kind of like
Mhm.
shows a lot about the society. And and does what was really my main goal was just introduces little breadcrumbs for people to follow when the book is over. It's not a book about how to recreate our school system, right? It's not a thorough manual on how to do that, but it leaves this little trail of breadcrumbs for people to be like, oh, that's interesting, that's different, I never heard that, I wonder if there's any schools like this, or I wonder if other
Mhm.
people are doing these types of things. And my goal was to do that with like as many different topics as possible, really.
Achieved. Check.
Yeah.
From the moon landing
Yeah.
beyond.
Lots of breadcrumbs, sprinkling out a lot of breadcrumbs, a lot of breadcrumbs. And it's also like the secret, the thing about that is like it actually for me makes it easier because I don't have to actually create a manual on how to do these things, which would be really, really challenging and dense and long and thorough and hard. And this makes it, I just kind of easy and fun way to just open people's minds to as many things as
There is
possible.
a scene when the two young children of the mentor were prepping dinner, and Sandra went over to one of the little girls and was like, "Oh my gosh, good job!" and said it in that energy. I can hear it. You hear it
Yeah, yeah.
everywhere. And the little
Wow.
girl looks at Sandra with this like, "Why are you talking to me like that?" And Sandra basically asked the child's mom, was like, what did I do? And the mentor was like, you sounded inauthentic. And the daughter didn't know what to do with that. because she's not used to this inauthentic personality type in her world, because the people are in the frequency of authenticity, and we know that that is the highest frequency on the planet. It's not love, it's
Yes.
authenticity.
Oh wow. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, because and the mentor's name is Pono, by the way, just to remind you. Um, yeah, I that's something I see and feel all the time as well. And like I know that kids sense that. And like I think what she says in the book is like she had just heard you compliment my dish, like you were talking to a peer, and now you're complimenting her dish, like she's a baby or whatever, and they sense that inauthenticity, and I see it all the time. As a parent of young children, I definitely do this too. I forget, but I try to really be mindful of like I'm going to talk to you about these things the way I would say to anybody else. And I think sometimes they'll do one little thing and we're like, oh wow, you're so strong, wow, and they're just kind of like you can see it, and they're like, you. All I did was pick up this thing and put it there. And I'm not that strong from this. They get it. But if I want them to believe that they are actually strong and capable and powerful, it needs to be said in a way that like represents that, and not just like overly celebrating every little thing that they do that's really not that hard, because then they're like they lose track of like what's real here and what's not. And then if we're comparing it to when they do things that are take more courage and more bravery and more stick to itiveness or whatever, that like they can actually tell the difference and feel the difference in
It was
our
a great
tone.
reminder for me with how I speak to my niece and nephews. Totally a habitual thing to talk to children like they're children versus a capable, able human.
Yeah. Yeah, then she says something about like presuming competence, and like it kind of like it almost has that like dress for the job you want, not the job you have sort of mentality. So it's like speak for them in the way I think I've heard her saying, it's actually just coming back to me now. It's like shoot. Something along the lines of speak to your son like a king, and a king
Mm,
will appear, or something along those lines, that kind of thing. I forget the exact words, but it's that it's that
mm-hmm.
that
And we
concept.
don't need a manual for that. We need a compelling story, which is your book.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
So you have emphasized that it was important for you to not write this place as a utopian society or this like fantastical place that only in our wildest dreams we could imagine it to be. Can you talk about your heart behind that?
Yeah. Yeah, that was important for me. It was a filter I tried to keep on at all times, because I did want to introduce these topics that most would consider very out there, very maybe woo woo, or impossible. They would never work here, kind of stuff. But I wanted to show that, I wanted to show it in a way where the reader could entertain the idea of this being a possibility, either in our lifetime or shortly after, within our children's lifetime. And because a lot of it was about just fundamental shifts in principles, right? And yes, I know a lot of them, there's trust, honor, integrity, and especially when they contrast what how we do things here versus how they do things there, like there's this sharp contrast that really wakes you up a little bit. It can feel like a punch in the gut a little bit, but it also shows that like it's it can be pretty simple and straightforward, right? It's like coming back to these things that are just in us already. We don't have to learn something new. It's like kind of the thing. It's like when they kept saying, "Oh, you're going to teach me the code," or "What about the learning the code?" Like you don't need to learn the code. You know the code. It's about like unlocking it and coming back to it, and remembering. Like Alec, when Alec talked about at Confluence, Alex Zek, he talked about, I don't know if you're at his final closing speech or not, but it was about, we're remembering. And it was interesting because I had a talk with a friend about the book just a couple of days before I left. And he does these types of things, and he helps me, like, if he kind of urged me to figure out a way to explain the book in one sentence, figure out a way to explain the book in one word. and he suggested the word was remembering, and I was really like agreeing with that. And I told Alec that. I gave Alec a copy of the book,
I
and I told him that.
mean,
I was like, it's
so
funny that you said
cool.
that because of this conversation. Yeah, I really wanted to read it. And but yeah, but I kept this filter on all the time of like, you know, really making it so it doesn't turn into this sci-fi fantasy, right? This is something that I feel we can begin to work towards. And again, it's not a manual of how to, because I don't have all the answers of how we can convert our society to an Okablaya style society. But I, again, can introduce the principles that are very much realistic and doable. And yeah, sorry, I forgot where I was going with that. But basically, I kept a filter on of like, can this, I want it to be present time, because a lot of books take place in like the future, or like in a kind of unidentified distant future. And I think that throws people off sometimes, of like trying to bring it into their real world of like, well, this isn't really real. And they also, a lot of times, if it teeters too far into fantasy, or like something like the Hunger Games, for example, like the Hunger Games has some really important concepts that reflect what are happening in our society right now, but because it's a fantasy and not real,
Yeah,
people don't seem to be making
you
the
nailed
connection.
it.
So it's like yes, it's a fictitious setting in society, but theoretically everything that's happening is real and possible. So I was really adamant about that
Hmm.
the whole time.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think about you bringing into the story permaculture, regenerative ag. My husband's a permaculture designer, and I think what's interesting too is society has been warming up to that concept for many years. I mean, even to the point where there have been people that we never thought would have a garden tell us about their garden. And I'm like, that's so cool. Rock on. Let's grow our own food. So I think that there are some principles, especially in your book, that society is like, yeah, we're getting there, and then there's a few that are like, all right, that's a little too far off for me. And I think one of them would be, and it's not so much a principle, it's just a concept of people reckoning with areas of their life that they are realizing were wrong. So beliefs,
Can you
or
explain?
you had a little bit of information about conspiracy theories. So people having to reckon with, oh my gosh, that was true and I was wrong. I don't think I can handle that. That's a big topic for people. There's a cognitive dissonance there, that is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, and that actually reminds me of a point I'll come to in a second that helps with the last question as well. But yeah, it's funny that first chapter, he's really like warning Garrett, like, listen, you're gonna be exposed. He like first on the plane, she like warns him. Then he's like, listen, you're gonna be exposed to a lot of things here. Like a lot of people just don't make it. And he's like, what do you mean they don't make it? He's like, they're exposed to a lot of ideas that they just can't come around on. Their belief systems are challenged. He's like, what? Like how is that possible? Like, and that was, you probably could figure it out, but that's really me preparing the reader, right, for like what they're about to experience. And I think that it's so important in this process for us as individuals and as a collective to really be able to be like, huh, maybe I was wrong, or I was wrong. And maybe it's not even wrong, but it's maybe wrong's not even the word, but maybe it's like, the way I previously perceived my reality or the world around me or whatever was inaccurate compared to what I see now. And yeah, I was only ever doing my best with the information I had, but I'm willing to realize that it wasn't serving me. It's not serving us as a collective. And now I'm going to look at something different, a different idea. That ability, first of all, just even as an individual, that was when I, again, with the fast and all that stuff, it made me realize like, holy crap, I've been
Hmm.
wrong about a lot of things. And like, At first, I was so scared to admit that because I was the guy with all the answers all the time. I was the head coach. I was giving workshops, da da da. And then I was like, maybe I don't really know much about anything. And maybe that's okay. Like if I can be
Right.
okay with that. And then every time I'm learning something new, I'm constantly trying to prove myself wrong and if I'm trying to actually actively prove myself wrong, I'm continuing to just scratch things off the list that are wrong and knowing that I might not know what's right, but at least I'm moving closer to it. And I wanted this concept to be like you could not miss the point, the importance of this, that this is important. And yeah, so I introduced some heavy stuff that a lot of people may or may not have really thought much about or questioned in the past. But I believe it was really important for us to just open our eyes up to just almost being like, maybe everything's wrong. So what? If everything is wrong, okay, what do we do about it? And we're so ingrained, we're so conditioned to want to be right all the time, right? It's like how we're start schooling and everything. It's always about who's right and who's wrong. You get points when you're right, and you lose points when you're wrong. And how often you're right determines everything in your life, pretty much, for the first 13 to 18 years. And we're so afraid to just have been wrong that I wanted to make that clear. And I'll make a final point about it that kind of ties into something I meant to say about the last part too, or at some point earlier. But the fact that it's a fiction story and the fact that there are these characters allows me to really introduce the polarities. I kind of really walk the line on sort of like somewhat extreme examples of alternative viewpoints, because the characters can be the skeptic. The characters can say, "Oh, no way, bullshit," like whatever, like that the reader might be feeling. And that's really helpful. In other words, if I was to do this in a nonfiction format and be like, here's how we should rebuild our society, and kind of introduce these way out there concepts, people are like, are you freaking kidding me, dude? Like, no way, right? But instead, I got to have the characters say that and then have the dialogue around it and kind of make it a little bit less direct about like everything you think is wrong, here's what you should do instead, and let the reader sort of read between the lines a little bit and kind of absorb some things indirectly that don't feel as much of an attack.
Yeah. Brilliantly done.
Thank you.
I think that's so
I
much
tried.
of society's story, because it was also my story. This disconnect from home base, from the home frequency, or from within. And part of that disconnect is there is fear of charting a path, or there is a fear of breaking free from the tribe that you are in. For me, it was a religious tribe. If I really was my authentic self, I'm gonna lose this tribe. That ended up happening because I couldn't be my full authentic self in that society, because who I really was not actually welcome. And so your main character, the male, experiences that when he comes back from the island back to North America. He is interacting with his old community, his friends that he has had a long time, and he's realizing that there is now a dissonance between this life-changing experience he had, or also known as a spiritual awakening, and he's realizing, oh my gosh, like we are not the same people, and we are becoming very different people. And so I think for the listener, I just want to encourage them, if you are if you are finding yourself in this place of coming into this spiritual awakening, maybe number 1, maybe number 10. I mean, I've had many in my life, but there is this place where it's uncomfortable, and there's this tension of looking at your old life and looking at your new life and going, they don't match. There's not a match there. So I can either throw away everything I learned, all of the gold nuggets, or I can be brave enough, I can be confident enough, I can believe in the source inside of me that connects me to the heavens, that connects me to the core of the earth, and I can take a risk to see what else is out there. I just want to encourage the listener to take that risk, because that is where growth is.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. And I don't think you'll ever regret looking back and say, I took a risk that was felt like it was full alignment with who I'm meant to be. I don't think it's possible. Even if there's some ramifications in your circles in your network, because but you can and probably very much will regret staying where you are and being someone you're not, while the person that's really inside of you is dying to come out and come alive. That is a recipe for deep regret, where hey, I'm gonna go I feel this calling, I'm doing this thing, I'm gonna be this person. Yeah, maybe there's things like, you know, the road might be bumpy for a while, but I think you'll take those challenges off of that, the other scenario, without a
Mm.
doubt.
And I believe
100%.
too that so much of my illness, the autoimmune, the depression, the anxiety, even the environmental illness that I've recovered through, I'm air quoting some of this stuff, but I believe that the sickness, a lot of it was rooted in me not being able to be myself.
Mm.
And so it
Mm-hmm.
became oppressed and suppressed in my physical body
Yes.
until I got so
Yes.
sick that I had to choose the new risky way.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I don't even know the whole story, and I can say that I'm sure that that's true. A, because it makes sense, and B, because if you feel that in your heart to be what was happening, then I trust that intuition, and it absolutely makes sense. I think there's so much of the imbalances and diseases and sicknesses that in our society, especially the chronic stuff, is linked to, there's a huge part of us just being untrue to ourselves and misaligned, and versions of ourselves inside that are dying, like literally dying away because we're not acting on impulse, and that's eating at us from the inside out. It's just to not be looking at it that way, I think would be a mistake.
Well, the characters walk the reader through these evolutionary time periods.
Yeah, that's the idea. And one point I was going to bring up is when he's meeting all that resistance. So he's home and he's like, "Wow, this is not, all this change. I'm a new person." And one interesting thought is that, just a little thing to point out, is that nobody's really like directly saying like, "Hey, man, like don't change.
Mm,
Stay the way you are." It's not direct like that. It's never. It's very indirect. It's like, are you sure you want to do that? Or what? No, that's not a good idea. Like, what about this? What about the money? What about like, you can fill in the million blanks of people saying, well, what about health insurance? Or like, if you're thinking about leaving your job and trying something new, like there's this empirical code, right? That comes creeping in of like, what about this? What about that? That can't work. It's never someone being like, no, don't go be a better version of yourself, right? Like no one would say that directly, but it's all this indirect messaging coming in about keeping yourself small and
mm.
staying put.
Powerful. Powerful. Because it's not directly in our faces. And that's kind of the whole point of why we as a society are at the point we're at. Because we didn't know we were
Yes.
getting caught off guard.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't
Mm-hmm.
know that we were getting subtle programming in our education.
Yes.
We didn't know that we were absorbing societal programming in our favorite Netflix show. But when you go within, there's that natural intuition from your higher source and from yourself, from a grounded place of like, actually, I don't need that in my life, or I don't want that, or that's not going to help me get to the next step, or actually, that thing used to make me uncomfortable. I need that now. And there's a
Yes.
natural guidance,
Yes.
and you've written the characters to be able to learn to trust this natural guidance.
Yes. Because it's so hard. It's I mean, it's so simple and clear sometimes, like just follow that. And then it's so hard in a world like where the world around us is not set up to like promote that or encourage that or support that, really. It's in many cases you're going against the herd, you're going against the support systems, you're going against the safety nets. and having to in choosing that route, that path.
I've got a twofold question for you. Pretend I am the male main character and I just returned back to North America after this life-changing experience. Because we know there are listeners that are in this place. Can you offer encouragement to that person?
Yeah, so like, remember the part of the story? It's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's not a too big of a deal. But you know how he ends up picking up that other book off the bookshelf at one point, and he reads the introduction. To me, like, there's some really good like guidance in there, kind of along the lines of what we just said, of like the like there's gonna be this resistance around you. The people around you are gonna unknowingly try to keep you small, and it's not because they're trying to stop you. It's because they love the version of you that
Yeah.
currently exists. And like, I think that's kind of the key of it. It's like the version of you that currently exists that you're trying to move past is what people around you know and love already. And that's in some ways a great thing. People, you have family, friends in your circle that love the version of yourself, of who you are now, and subconsciously don't want to see you change beyond that. And there's going to be a pull from that, from all directions, obvious in your face stuff, but also very, very subtle energies pulling and trying to keep that person, including your own ego, trying to keep that version of yourself exactly where it is. And you just basically have to continually to ask yourself of do I love that version of myself enough to keep it how it is, or do I want to explore a new version of myself that is likely, better is not really the word, but a more evolved, higher, more powerful version of myself. Is it worth risking? And do I want to see? Do I want to? Am I willing to go to my grave without seeing what that version of myself could really be, or not? And for most people, I think the answer is no. Nobody wants to go the rest of their life knowing there's a better version of myself trying to come out, and I'm just going to kind of keep shoving them down and in. So yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if that's the best advice, but like, just it's an awareness of what the path is going to really entail.
If someone is in that position today, then some light bulbs are going off for them.
Yeah, and this was important for the story. I actually didn't intend. I intended the story to end in Okablia. So this is a tiny bit of a spoiler, but not really. But I realized as the story went on, I was writing, I was like, you know what? I can't really just like end on this high note. It's gotta. They have to have that contrast. They have to go back, because many of us have been there. People have been to something like Confluence or some kind of retreat or some kind of plant medicine ceremonies, and we're like, we have this vision. I'm going to go back to my life, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to do this and this and that. I'm going to recreate myself overnight, and then we get back, and it's like, it's like the car. We hit the mud pit or whatever. If we go from flying, we feel like we're cruising down the highway, and now we're like kind of back in the mud, and it's really important, I think, to show that, because otherwise it's unrealistic that you're going to go and have this thing and everything's going to change and all life's going to be great from here on out. So I decided to add this part of the story out of necessity for this concept.
And so for Sandra, if someone is in the position that she is in, where she has this experience that really blows her away and she's reconciling with friends and family, I mean, how would you encourage someone that's in her position?
Well, it's funny. So she has a little bit of a different experience. So I'm just peeking out the window because it looks like it's going to thunderstorm, and I know my car windows are
It's
open.
been thundering so much here.
See you really quick. I think we're good.
Please get up and close your window.
If I hear any thunder, I'll just I don't know, I'll have to pause for a couple seconds. It's funny, again, it's slight spoiler, but no big deal. She has a different experience when she goes back. I mean, it's also challenging in its own ways, but she kind of follows through pretty well on her things. And there's I think a big message there that I decided to kind of spell out in the final chapter. I didn't want it to be missed. I was gonna originally like make it a little less obvious, but she has like these big, huge like awakenings, and then she realizes that like the implementation and integration of those things are just very small, simple. I'm sorry's, thank yous, I love yous, I forgive yous, and that was like I was like I really want to make sure the reader sees this, that like she gets like access to all the like information of the world and universal wisdom like comes pouring in, but in application it's actually the little simple things, right? And you know, I for her, like if I had her in front of me, I would be like, "You freaking killing it right now." You know, like this was a like you just came home and like said the things you need to say and did the things you said you were gonna do, and there was some resistance and there were some things that happened, but like you freaking did it. You know, like that like what happens in that scene in that chapter is not actually very easy. It like to just like look the people in the eye and say the things that need to be said that are maybe years or decades overdue. Um, that's where so many of us will struggle a lot, is like that very, very direct, simple, hey, I'm sorry. Hey, I love you and I'm proud of you. That sort of thing. Um, so yeah, I guess like my like advice to her would be like, keep doing it. And I don't know what else, to be honest with you. I'd have to. I mean, if I had more time to think, I'm sure I could. But nothing's
No,
really
I
like
think
coming to
your
mind.
answer makes sense because as a reader, I felt like proud of her that she was doing a really wonderful job despite the tension that she was encountering and things not going perfectly the way that she thought they might now that she is this evolved conscious being. One of my favorite scenes was when she reconciled with her sister, and her sister, with two kids and Starbucks in her hand, and is a, typical who I used to be, a dysregulated nervous system spaz, over caffeinated, like taking on the world with
Yeah,
5 minutes of my time. How am I supposed to do that? I'll figure it out. So
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
resonated with my old self with her sister, but there was a point when they were at the pumpkin patch with her nieces, and maybe you can help me fill in the gaps, but there was this uh what how did you describe it? A hippie girl?
Yeah, yeah, like her old like hippie
So
friend. Yeah, yeah,
a hippie girl came up to Sandra. They were friends or they knew each other in high school.
yeah. They were like childhood friends who grew apart. She went like super hippie,
Basically, you're
and they kind of
subtly
like
saying this hippie girl had her own spiritual awakening that at the time
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sandra was judging and was like,
Yes.
who she totally changed. I'm enhancing the narrative, but like what happened? She went to India and she came back totally changed. Or she went on this retreat and she's not the same person. And so then you have Sandra's sister who's immediately like, whoa, like who's this hippie friend? Like you're not becoming her, are you?
Yeah, yeah.
It was
Yes, right.
perfect because that is what
Yeah,
we do as humanity. We are seeing people that have evolved or changed. And you're right, you said it so well. Like, we aren't sure the person they're becoming because we don't recognize them anymore.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. They're becoming someone new and different that we don't know and recognize, and like we don't know what to make of it. So in most cases, we default to teasing and poking fun, or like talking to our other friends about how this friend is like losing their mind or whatever. And so so like that's like that's what you're up against in these things. And that really kind of wraps up like a big point at the end. It's like they have to decide, are they willing, when they go home, are they willing to fight those battles in the name of a greater good and in the name of societal revolution and healing, or do they just kind of retreat back
Mm,
into what's safe and
yeah.
comfortable?
Well, I really saw an old version of myself in Sandra in the whew, this could change everything if I decide to move forward. especially when it comes to spiritual beliefs, allegiances, um, community that has been considered your family, right? And I think a lot of people are coming to terms with this of, am I just still here because I'm afraid? And I just can't help but think, like, take the risk, you guys. Like, take the risk, because there's also a whole nother Oklablaya world out there. That's the beauty of it, is that when you take that risk into the unknown, you don't think that you're going to find like-hearted, like-minded, like-soul people. And that was even the beauty of
Mm-hmm.
Confluence, is another kind of
Yes.
encouragement to my soul that there are people that are in the same vein with me. So just because
Mm-hmm.
I'm exiting this territory doesn't mean I'm going to be alone.
Yeah. Right. And that's important. That's why things like Confluence are important for the people like, oh crap, I'm not just the lone crazy person in my family or my neighborhood. Like my people are out there. And that's a big part of this story and why I wrote this story too. For people to read it, resonate it with me. Like, this is what I, like some version of like, yes, this is it. Like, this is what I want to like create or be a part of or like go through myself. And the story, ideally in my mind, this becomes a rallying point for people all over the world who are um, feeling these things. And this is like something to rally around and become a center point, is what I was trying to say, of like a common thing, a common piece of literature. This is what the power of stories and literature can be, of art, right? And for people to find their people through this. And that's one of the things that I'll mention here, before we close at some point, to how I'm trying to, not trying, we're in the process of like creating
Yeah, tell
community
us
around the
about that. I
story
want to
for
hear
people.
what you're doing when you're not writing.
Yeah. So I'm not writing at all right now, although I'm really itching. I'm finally like at the point where, like, okay, I want to start writing the sequel. At first I didn't, because I was just like, no, I'm not ready to write again right now. Now I'm like thinking about the sequel. Things are starting to come in. I'm like, man. Um, but what I'm doing, so essentially, I'm actually, a lot of this is fresh and new. I've been feeling into what the next steps really look like. A lot of that based on people's feedback, and really where I'm at is basically just trying to bring together people who have read and finished the story. And I actually am going to start reaching out to people who I know who have finished, and creating a little bit of a community. And sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I've started a channel in an app called Signal, which is kind of like Telegram for those that are familiar. Basically, a Telegram channel, and people who have read the story or are currently reading the story or have like shown some kind of interest in like the method, from some other way, but mostly people who have read or are reading are in this channel. And I'm doing like short daily podcasts using literally voice notes about that expand on some of the concepts in the book, you know, share my own personal journey a little bit while I'm working, just kind of like little
Mhm.
daily nuggets sort of thing. And with prompts, thought things for people to think about or write about or talk, just discuss in the channel. And it's a really great start. There's about 100
That's
people in it
awesome.
already. And yeah, there's great, even just the thread we had today. I think it was like a 4-minute podcast, and there's like a whole bunch of discussion around it. Um, but so I'm doing more of that. Just kind of like, I don't know exactly where we're going yet, but let's all just like kind of stay together. And I'm also actually just decided that I'm going to be doing some mentorship as well for people who have
Wonderful.
finished the story. Starting with anyone who's my give back to people who have taken the time to read a 660-page novel is to offer some free mentorship. And it's really um, it's similar. It's like not that I have all the answers mentor. It's like very Okablo based, right? Or it's like, let's talk about where you're at, what you're working through. Like kind of, I call it like in stride mentoring, where it's not like hey, we have to tear everything down and rebuild. It's like, let's fall into stride together on some of the major things you're working through right now, some sticking points, and I can sort of play that Alcoa role to the best of my ability of like helping be that unbiased third party that can do my best to help sort through the most challenging sticking points and come out with some actionable steps. And I figure I want to offer that to my readers as a give back, and also because the concepts in the book, like to me, it makes sense if we've both read. Well, I've wrote the story, you read the story. There are the concepts here that are going to be the main principles we're going to be working with anyway, right? So, yeah, I'm giving out free sessions actually to people, and then we're what I'm experimenting with, and I think this is going to work for a while. Is like an abundance exchange model where it's like, hey, if you want to continue, this will meet once a week. You get to decide what it costs, what you pay.
Love it.
I could definitely change my mind on that in a few months, but I want to have this like not just like, hey, throw
Yeah,
me $10 if you like,
a
like
fair value
invest in
exchange.
what you feel is, yeah, what's the value. It should stretch you a little bit. It should make you invested, but it's like I want to work with 1 to 2 dozen people who are super committed to changing themselves and changing the world, and it allows me to replicate the principles in this story and the wisdom that's coming through all of us. I don't have your answers. I'm just going to help you kind of pull them out of yourself, right? So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing in this point. And then I'm also we have our first retreat. We have a retreat coming up at the end of the summer. It is a plant medicine based retreat with a medicine man that we're bringing in from Mexico. Um, that I'll share. If anyone that's listening wants more details, I can do that more in private. But uh, that's the one we're doing now. And then I don't think we're going to do another one in 25. But the idea is to have 4 or
Mhm.
so of those on this schedule
Mm.
for 26.
That's fantastic. You're in your gifts. Like you are doing and executing what you are good at. And also, it very much seems like where you are already in flow. I mean, because that was the premise of the book too, is the mentorship, the guidance, the coaching, not this like hierarchical, I know more or I know better. It's like, yeah,
Yes.
I'm with you in this because life is a spiral of
Yes.
learnings. I mean, I'm revisiting things
Yes.
that I thought I had all figured out 10 years ago, but here I am back at,
Exactly.
ground base learning again.
Yeah. 100%. And thank you for like sharing that and noticing that. And like, yeah, the first thing I tell people when we start is like, listen, you're going to know just about the stuff that I'm working through and where I'm at. And it's not like I'm sitting at the top of the world looking down sort of thing. It's, I've taken big chances. We moved out of the country. I dedicated my life to a book that I knew like wasn't going to just sell 1 million copies overnight. Right. Like, but I still took that chance. Like, and there's trade-offs to that. There's pros and cons to this that I'm working through myself, and yes, I'm doing everything I possibly can to stay within the alignment of what I teach, what I believe in, and what I know I'm meant to be, and navigating that in this three-dimensional society that offers its fair, amount of challenges along the way. So like, yeah, it's just like hey, we're walking the
Yeah.
path together kind of
Beautiful.
thing.
Well, my husband is reading your book now. He's like 100 pages
Oh, cool.
in, and
Cool.
he told me last night that he wants to name his next boat Project Delphinius.
Yes. That's awesome.
Because we're both fisher people,
That's
and he's a
okay. I didn't
fisherman,
know that.
and naming a boat is a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I know it is. So that's like really cool to hear. And that's just cool. That's like the type of stuff when you're writing a book, a year, 2 years ago, whatever, year and a half ago, when I'm writing this story, I'm like, I don't even know if anyone's ever going to read this, but I also like, part of me believes that things like that will happen. So, that people will like, I want to see these kind of cultural trends and stuff kind of based around the story. Like that's obviously an
Yeah,
author's
well,
dream, right?
we will send you a picture when he, gets the sticker on his boat. I don't know if he's gonna go full Project Delphinius. We'll wait till he finishes the book because he might change his mind.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's finish the story, let it settle in a little bit
He
before we
might
start
finish
doing
the
anything
book and be like,
crazy.
"Yeah, I'm out."
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Let's just finish the story, and then before you do any and make any rash decisions.
Oh, this is so fun. I feel like we're back in the shuttle, uh, going to
Yes,
Sovereignty Ranch to spend a week just
yes,
learning and dancing to 432 Hertz and eating really good food.
yes.
And I mean, very much so. The content in your book was confluence in so many ways.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to just quickly thank you as well for not only just being a great friend to connect and meet there, but to actually follow through on reading the story. And listen, I don't take it personal. A lot of people told me over those course of days, like, "Oh, I'm going to read your book," and like I said, I'm really not holding resentment for people who haven't, but I definitely hold an appreciation for people who have. And as you know now after reading, like that's literally the people who, the kind of I don't want to say that the story's made for them because I want it to go beyond the people who are already on this path, but like I know that starting with people in that audience in that crowd is a great place to introduce this story because I know that they will not only love it but actually have their own networks of people who they could introduce it to as well. But I just wanted to thank you for actually purchasing it and then seeing it and then still opening it up and starting
Wearing
to
a
read it.
sweater that represents your book
Yes, and
cover.
wearing a sweater in August. Yes, that matches the book cover. Thank you. And sharing it with your husband, and that's how it's going to happen. That's going to be like, hey, I read this book. You should check it out. It's the idea of selling 1 million copies overnight is like quite literally impossible. So it starts with one person at a time, finishing it and then sharing it.
If
So
I have
thank
not
you.
said this enough, it is an awesome book. And it was so great. I wanted to do a whole podcast with you to just talk about the book. So that is how I feel about it, that it is that important of a message to get out into the world. So, Brian, I am just really grateful to have met you, to have shared the container of confluence and many more containers in the future together. I'm just very excited to be on this planet with you at this time, really for such a time as this. It's a very important time in history that we get to have our feet on the ground and be a part of the change that we wish to see in the world. So thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to when we start building our, Okoblaya replicable, excuse me,
Yeah.
replica villages and communities, which I didn't mention, but is like, I think the natural progression of all of this. Um, you will be there to help design the homes and the layouts, and I'll be borrowing your expertise. And yeah, so have you ever, just real quick, sorry, I just thought of something. Have you ever heard of the books, The Ringing
Yes, I
Cedars?
have, but I have not read them.
Yeah. I've read the first three. I think there's 10. But I bring those up because to me they're a model for me because so like what's happening now, they're Russian, they were written in Russian first. So the translations are like I read three, they're amazing and they're kind of translations are like a little kind of clunky, I guess. So but the principles and the concepts are really, really amazing. There are a few borrowed scenes. So I don't know if
No,
you're trying to
please
close
share.
up or not on time, but um, the scene where he meets Heyoka and he's like holding the seeds under his tongue and he's planting them in the farm. That's all like actually borrowed. That's all concepts from the Ringing Cedars, which is partially why I made sure to mention them. It's like one of the only parts of the whole book that's not like my original sort of thing. So I mentioned the Ringing Cedars that Alcoa had been there. I just planted a little seed there for anyone that knows, like kind of like a tip of the hat sort of thing. But what's happening there is that Anastasia is the woman in the book who is a kind of the spirit that teaches the author, and she teaches him how to like rebuild the world essentially. And she teaches a very specific thing called a king's dominion, which is like a 2.2 acre plot of land that is for your family for forever, basically. And like when you're planting seeds that your great grandkids will eat from and stuff like that. And what's happening is that they've become so popular, they've actually changed some laws and regulations and zoning things in Russia. There are communities forming. There's over 1,000 communities formed around the concepts in these books, some of which have 400 or 500 families living in them. with their own each with their own 2.2 acres of land and whatnot, abiding by these principles. And that is very much inspiration for me and where what I'd like to see transpire. I won't be all me, and that's the point, is that we can use this as something to rally around and start to recreate a new world and a new earth based on something that's
Hmm.
eternal and infinite. And I forget why I brought it up originally, but like that's the so as we get to that stage, I'm sure we will be
I
working
share
together.
that vision as well. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So
Thank
I'm
you.
glad you brought that up. And
Thank
I've
you.
been trying to find the first book, but it's either $25 on eBay and it's gone, or it's like $200.
Yeah, they're hard to come by. I think we have the box set we bought a few years ago. My wife loves them as well, and there's some really. I was actually just listening to a podcast with. There's a guy who's like kind of trying to create it here in the States, like the villages
Okay.
and stuff. Um, but definitely consider picking it up on Kindle or something if it's possible,
Oh,
or
duh, it's
some
on
sort of
Kindle.
version. I'm assuming it is. I don't even know, but I
It's not on
imagine that it
Audible.
would
I
be.
did look.
And I think they're working on like better
Hmm.
English translations, if
Okay.
I'm not mistaken. This guy, what he's doing. Um, anyway, I would say try to figure out some way to read the first one, and it's like 150 pages or something. It's like what you probably were expecting to see
Like
in
The
my.
Alchemist.
So it's not as it's not as big of a commitment,
Brian, it
but it's
wasn't a
worth it.
commitment. It was fun.
Okay,
I
good.
love a good
Thank
fun
you.
book when I'm going to sleep. So,
Yeah,
anyway, it was fantastic.
good.
All right. Well,
Good.
I appreciate you so much, and I will talk to you soon.
You as well. Thank you.